So we start by sitting upright. The head is gently suspended from above. Body is relaxed at ease. Let your breath gradually sink down into your belly. Gently smile a bit with your lips, your eyes. Softening the eyes, releasing all the tension that may be in the forehead. And like this, you allow your body, your mind, everything to gradually settle down, slow down. Become more quiet. And breathing in, let your body fill up with consciousness, feeling the entire body. As you breathe out, releasing, softening through your whole body. Allow all those little pockets of tensions to melt away, to dissolve. Just keeping that simple task, simple rhythm, breathing in, feeling the body, breathing out, releasing, softening. You can go through your body systematically if you like, or you can just allow your body to show you what it wants to release. Go in a more intuitive way. You might find that you guide yourself. You may talk to yourself, encouraging yourself, telling yourself what to do. All that is good, and that is not a distraction. And it's also perfectly okay if you do that verbally. If you guide yourself in that way, that's good. But as soon as you notice that you're talking to yourself about things that are not relevant to this moment, to what you're doing right now, gently bring yourself back to the task at hand. And the task at hand is to breathe in, feel the body, breathe out, softening, releasing all the tension you may find. You can think of this as a training, so you don't need to be able to perfectly do this, whatever that means anyways. But simply do it as good as you can. So the first part where you breathe in and feel your entire body, do that as good as you can. The second part is you breathe out and release, soften the body. Same thing, do it as good as you can. Training yourself to be mindful of what you're doing, keeping in mind what you're doing, not forgetting it. Notice how the way you guide yourself, the way you talk with yourself, influences what you do and how you do it. For example, if you were to tell yourself, "Oh, this is boring, I hate doing this. When will we go to the next stage, the next level, the next thing?" Then it will have an influence on what you feel, what you perceive. That will have an influence on the level of tension in your body and your mind. Whether you feel pleasure or the opposite. I'd like you to open your awareness to the sound, to the soundscape, just hearing the various noises and sounds around you. Notice how your attention moves from sound to sound, naturally, effortlessly. Just allow that to happen, simply knowing where your attention is right now. Just let your attention rest with the various sounds. As long as you're hearing a sound, you're doing the right thing. If your attention would pull away from sound and get lost in a train of thoughts, then you've forgotten the sound, lost mindfulness of the sound. As soon as you notice, simply return. Come back to the sounds. Remembering the sounds. Just stoically keep coming back again and again. Don't make a drama out of it. You go, oh, I'm such a bad meditator, I'm so distracted, I'm always distracted. Don't do any of that. Instead, simply just learn to come back. Calmly, stoically, again and again. Just remaining aware how your attention moves from sound to sound. And let's add feelings and sensations to the mix. Notice when your attention goes to a feeling in your body and how it jumps from feeling to feeling, from sensation to sensation, just as effortlessly as it jumped from sound to sound. And also notice there's nothing you can do about the fact that it doesn't stay anywhere. It just keeps jumping around. From feeling to sound, from sound to sound, from sound to feeling, from feeling to feeling. Back and forth. Always on the move. So as long as you're either hearing or feeling, doing the right thing. But for most of us, this is not it. There is more that we experience in this moment. It's not just sound and feeling, but also thinking. Sometimes your attention goes to thoughts. And sometimes you get lost in thoughts. See if you can catch the moment when it goes to a thought. And then simply observe that thought as something that arises and passes, just like sound, just like sensation. It's a couple of words or images, and those words and images, they come and then they go. And then other words and other images come and go. If you can see it like this, you're doing it right. If instead you don't see that you're thinking, you're instead getting lost in a train of thought, you become the thinker. We need to wait until you become aware again, and you return back to the task at hand. Becoming aware of sound, of feeling, of the fact that thoughts also arise and pass. So in short, you want to become an observer of what you experience right now. What's going on? Knowing what is happening while it is happening. Feeling, hearing, thinking. And rarely also seeing, smelling, or tasting. Just remaining aware of the play of your senses. Just let them play freely. I'd like you to zoom into the process of thinking. Let's just look at that for a while. Look right into that area where thoughts arise. Just look right to that point. Watch those thoughts arise and then pass away.
bit like a cat that would sit in front of a mouse hole, looking inside, waiting for the mouse to come out. So see what kind of thoughts your mind comes up with. And let those thoughts freely arise and watch them freely pass. There's no restrictions, no laws, nothing to limit your thoughts. Let your mind have total freedom. And look how within this freedom, thoughts cannot be sustained. They come and go. Even if you wanted to keep a thought, make it static. It's impossible. It'll quickly transform and change before your eyes, turn into something different, be in constant motion. It's like trying to grab a cloud and hold on to it. And keep it the way it is. After a while, you'll begin to notice that there are little gaps in which there is no thought. You're simply just sitting here, aware of sound, feeling, but there's no voice, no commentary, no concepts on top. Relax into this emptiness of mind. Explore what it's like to be here without thoughts. In your own time, you can slowly come back and open your eyes, gently stretch a little bit if you like. All right, good morning everyone. It's good to have you. Today, I've got a question from Rebecca. So she writes, when I'm meditating or being mindful while going about daily tasks,
it helps me to say, not out loud but in my mind, things such as, this is just a thought. I am walking. Notice the thoughts as they appear and disappear. Notice how your attention moves from one thing to another thing, etc. This way, I can more readily observe my thoughts, feelings, emotions, etc. when they appear. However, as the observer, I am narrating my experiences. Is this voice that reflects on my thinking and feelings, etc., a necessary part of the meditation and mindfulness process? Is it my higher level consciousness narrating the experiences of my, quote, programmed or conditioned or lower level consciousness? Secondly, when things are going well, I find that fear rises up, as does an impending sense of danger. Why is this? I hope this makes sense. Thank you for your help. Okay. So let's start with the first question. So Rebecca says, not out loud, but in her mind, things to kind of guide herself. Like, this is just a thought, I'm walking, and so forth. And that helps her to more readily observe her thoughts, feelings, emotions, etc. when they appear. So this is a very intelligent move, actually. A lot of people, they hear me sometimes say things like, let go of your thoughts. Just surrender the thought process and rest in your natural stillness, or in the natural openness of the mind, without really buying into any of the narrated thoughts that are in there. And that is true at some level and helpful at some level. However, to get to that level, you need to somehow learn to guide yourself skillfully. That's a very important thing. And we continuously actually guide ourselves throughout our daily lives. This is something we already do in our heads all the time. We talk with ourselves. And the way we talk with ourselves can either be skillful or it can be unskillful. So when it is unskillful, then it leads to tension. It leads to closed-mindedness. It closes the heart, it closes the body, the tissues, the muscles. It puts you into fight or flight, it puts you into stress. It makes your presence in this moment very uncomfortable, very tight, very tense. That would be something considered unskillful. Anything that nourishes that tension, that level of stress or suffering. Because as you nourish it, it will expand, it will grow. As it grows, it will express itself through your body. The more, for example, if you've experienced some anger within yourself, if that anger is just slight, it's relatively easy to keep it in check and not to express it. But as the anger starts to grow, if you keep nourishing it, feeding it, if you fan the fire, so to say, then it grows, right? It starts to expand, and as it expands, it starts to gradually possess your body. It starts to possess your heartbeats, the way your blood flows. It starts to possess your way of the way you shape your face, your mimics, starts to possess your gestures. And eventually, when it gets really strong, it starts to possess your words. You start to talk coming from it. And eventually, it will even go to the point where the anger starts to possess your entire body fully. And then it will go about and express itself in the world. It's not enough yet. The anger wants to expand, it wants to grow. And it can do that if it has your body as a host. It can then
kind of infect other bodies. It can spread like that. So one person has anger, and then that anger goes on to the next person and the next person, and so it starts to just grow and infect sometimes whole groups or countries. And then it expresses itself in the form of a group consciousness. It's like a group of angry people. It's very destructive, it's very powerful. So that anger then can fulfill its mission to burn down its object. That's the idea. That's the point that anger wants to do. It wants to burn down the object. It's a very fiery type of emotion. So in that way we can understand that if you're nourishing something within yourself, it grows and it expands. And the way to nourish, for example, anger is how? Like you all have experience with it, you've all been angry, I suppose. So you all know what I'm talking about. How do you nourish your anger? You do so by the way you talk to yourself. Right? You talk about, for example, the person that you don't like. And you do that in a very specific way by, for example, repeating their negative traits. And if you observe your mind, the way it does that, it's kind of funny because it's not really incoherent sentences actually often. It's just like images and then a couple of words. It could be like the image of the person doing you harm, or just the person standing there out there on the street, and then your commentary is like, and his face, and his face. And then you zoom in mentally to the face, and you find kind of a disgust with it. You don't like it. That disgusting face. It's so punchable. It's so punchable. I want to punch that face. Right? That's already, you're pretty angry then. I mean, if you think about punching already, the anger is well nourished. It's pretty strong already. It already considers taking over your body and actually performing some harmful actions, burning down its object. And in order to burn down the object, you need to emotionally talk yourself into that kind of possession. So I think of anger and just in general emotions, I do kind of think about them as entities, almost like types of spirits. And you can allow those spirits to possess you. And you do that by, first of all, inviting them, giving them a stage, hearing them out, and then by feeding them. And sometimes the things that you feed regularly, they love to visit your house. Yeah, there are some people like the crazy cat lady or something like this. She always puts cat food in front of her house, and that's the way she becomes the crazy cat lady. Right? The archetype from some of the movies, right? The crazy cat lady. You know, what you feed, you attract. And it grows through your feeding, through your nutrition. And so the way you talk to yourself, that's the way you feed things. And what is skillful would be the things you feed that lead to long-term benefit and well-being. The things that are unskillful, they would lead to suffering. Now, you can feed things verbally, by verbal fabrication. That's the classic word that is used, verbal fabrication. By thinking to yourself in your own head, by verbalizing things, you give them a type of reality that you buy into, and it confirms your belief system, it confirms your self-image, and it confirms your stance in comparison to others in the world, and it confirms to you your whole worldview, basically. The way you talk to yourself. Some people love to talk about their problems all day long. Like me and my problems. I have so many problems, constantly have problems. My health is bad, my mind is bad, people around me are bad, and the stories that they talk about never really changes. It can be throughout an entire lifetime, the same kind of stories that come. Now, why is that? Because that's the type of thing that we fed for so long, So it keeps kind of like the spirits keep hovering around us, ready to possess us any moment, because we're so habituated to them and we're such good feeders. So our experiences, life experiences, are very often in alignment exactly with the spirits we feed. So the way we talk to ourselves constantly doesn't just uphold the way you perceive yourself and your life, and therefore your whole experience of life and yourself, but it also keeps that, deepens that, strengthens that. Like every time you talk in a specific way to yourself, it makes that whole thing stronger. It's not just that you just maintain it. That would be kind of okay, but it makes it worse. It's kind of like a training. You're training a muscle. If you talk to yourself in an angry way most of the time, or a fearful way most of the time, you kind of keep nourishing the spirits of fear or the spirits of anger, then they will begin to elaborate and they will bring more topics to you. When they visit you, they will provide you in turn. It's not only you nourishing them, but it's also them nourishing you. They will start to bring things to you that you would resonate with. Like the spirits of anger come and visit you, they will not talk about things that provoke a loving, a kind mindset, a compassionate mindset. They will bring things to you that provoke further rage and, anger and so forth. It's kind of like the YouTube algorithm, really. It just keeps bringing to you what you are very likely to watch. So you spend more time on it. So your spirits, they operate just like Netflix, like YouTube. They show you exactly what you resonate with. And it can really be your downfall if you're resonating with the wrong things, if you're resonating with the things that you actually don't want. Then it is your ruin. So it is one of the first skills in meditation practice, or just in general life, is to observe the way you talk to yourself. And kind of get a handle on that, to understand what kind of realities do I create in my mind continuously over and over again. They can be kind of like a preview of what's to come. Not so much in terms of then your external environment changing in accordance with your mind, but much more that your experience of whatever is to come will change in accordance with your mental state. So it may be well the case that you experience a beautiful life externally, but you're totally miserable in it because that's the thing you fed. So it's not really the case that what you hold in your mind and in your emotional being will manifest like that on the outside, but it will manifest your experience regardless of the outside. And that's the thing that really counts. Your experience of life is what counts. It's not the externals, but how you feel them, how you experience them. That's what's important to us. And of course, the chances that your external environment is going to be far nicer if you nourish good spirits is much higher. So it is very advisable, actually. I would recommend Rebecca to actually do that, to guide herself, to find out what kind of guidances are skillful for her. And I recommend the same to you and the same to myself. It's to guide oneself skillfully by using the right kind of words, the right kind of visions, the right kind of ideas that are useful and meaningful. A lot of people don't even know what they want, really. That's a good starting point of figuring out what you want, really, from life. What is it you're after? And if you then come up with a list of stuff, ask yourself why you want that. Were you born with wanting that stuff? Or have you learned later on that this is the thing you need to want? You let me show you a bunch of images and tell you what it is that you want to buy. These days we live in a world where needs are created all the time. They're not actually there naturally. And they are also created by verbal fabrication. Very skillfully so. There's a narrative, a story that you're actually buying into a story. You're not buying a car, you're not buying a piece of metal and rubber and plastic. You're buying a story that's behind it. Look at advertising, car advertising, or advertising for cigarettes, or advertising for anything. Really, it's telling you a story of freedom, story of power, the story of happy flexibility, stuff like that. It depends, right? And so you can advertise to yourself too. But first you need to know what you want. Then you advertise to yourself. Make that desire strong. So there's other people again that would say, like, hold on a second, the Buddha said you should have no desire. That is not what the Buddha said. You should have no desire. It's like telling people you should be the Buddha. You should be enlightened. That's a silly advice. But it's very important to have the right type of desires. Start there. Figure out what kind of desires and what kind of stories that you tell yourself that are really not serving yourself. Abandon them, replace them, transform those stories in any way you can. And then pursue stories that are lifting you up. Good way to do that is surrounding yourself with people who have good stories and who are talking to themselves and talking to each other in good ways. Yeah. When you do that in meditation, that's fantastic. It's exactly what I would recommend. And look, in meditation practice, this will get less and less. In the beginning, you will start out with very coarse kind of sentences, like, okay, bring your mind back to the breath or something. And you bring the mind back to the breath. Later on, it's enough to just have that little impulse. You don't have to say the thing to yourself anymore, you just come back. But in the beginning, it's really good to constantly tell yourself what to do. After all, that's what I do in guided meditation. And that's why people have good guided meditations. When you're sitting here in the room with me, most people have good meditation when they come here to the place and we sit together. You have good meditation. Why? Because I do 80% of the work for you. That's the reason. I tell you what to do. I am mindful on your behalf. So you can just lay back and, kind of enjoy the show. That's why it works out well. But actually, when you're going back home, then most people report, oh, it's so difficult, I can't do it. The reason is, now you need to be mindful on your own behalf. You need to guide yourself now. That can show you super clearly, wow, guided meditation was easy because I didn't do anything. That's why it's easy. So don't make the mistake to become a dependent on guided meditation, because that way you surely will develop no skill. You need to jump into the cold water and actually start to develop a skill, and you can only do that if you confront your absence of skill to the point where you find it unbearable. It's like, oh God, I have zero skill. I don't even know what to do with my own mind. It's really high time to take this thing serious and practice, actually. Build myself up rather than rely on others. And for that, you need to guide yourself a lot and very well. Okay, here's like a side question. Is it my higher level consciousness narrating the experience of my program conditioned lower level consciousness? I don't know. How do you define consciousness? How do you define program conditioned lower level consciousness? Why separate consciousness into higher or lower level? Raises a lot of questions. Maybe that's an example of a question that is not really needed. Is not really helpful. If I were to tell you now, yes, it is your higher level consciousness, what do you do with that answer? Then you're just sitting there and you go, like, yeah, it's my higher level consciousness, but it doesn't change anything really. Now you have a fancy word for it.
Can you repeat the question?
Is it my higher level consciousness narrating the experiences of my programmed, conditioned, or lower level consciousness? It's just, think of it as just you guiding yourself. That's perhaps really enough. I'm just guiding myself the way I usually do. And during meditation, you learn to do that well. Whether it's this part of the consciousness or that part, or how is it called, or... I don't think that's important. People get caught with these kind of things, you know. Like, is it a high level, low level? It is just what it is. And the question would be, is it skillful? Is it helping you? Or is it not helping you? If it's not helping you, abandon it. If it is helping you, do it, cultivate it. How to call it? What kind of categories it is? That's usually irrelevant. So, okay, second question. Secondly, when things are going well, I find that fear rises up, as does an impending sense of danger. Why is this? That's a very interesting question. I think very relevant to most people who are meditating. As soon as you start to do well, and you actually start to change, well, things start to really move. You are moving out of your familiar temperature zone. And you kind of have that internal thermostat, kind of like basic belief systems. I can be as good as X, and I can't get worse than Y. And that belief governs you. So as you start to get really good, and you actually develop skills, which is a clear proof you are valuing, loving yourself to an extent where you are actually lifting yourself up, there will be a point where that gets into conflict with your belief system. I can only be as good as X. And once you hit that glass ceiling, your internal thermostat, the psychic thermostat, will downregulate you. We usually know that as self-sabotage. So we start to, throw bricks into our own way, or sticks into the wheels of our bicycles, because we are exiting a zone that is familiar. And nothing is more terrifying than the unfamiliar. And that is equally valid as when it comes to success, as the opposite of success, failure. What is it? You take it only as long as you're familiar with it. And what's most important to people and our psyche in general is usually to just maintain the status quo of what you're familiar with. Just maintaining that. Just keep that red string throughout our entire life of the maintenance of my sense of self. I don't want that to fall apart. And success really would mean that your old self would have to fall apart and be replaced by a new, better version. Yes? And that falling apart of the old self is a kind of death. And it does feel like that. And it is very scary to leave behind what you're accustomed to, what you know, what you feel good about, what you're familiar with. To leave that behind is always scary. And so if you're developing skill, usually you will always enter a kind of phase in which you will start to feel threatened. And it's the old sense of self that is threatened by your new developments. That's usually a good sign, but also equally challenging. It's a good thing because it shows me that you're obviously, whoever wrote this, it shows me that that person is actually starting to make real progress. So it starts to feel like a real threat to the old sense of self. It feels like dying sometimes, like quite literally. You start to have nightmares all of a sudden, you have panic attacks, your whole life can fall apart in a way. Especially when it goes to the deeper kind of stuff. So you need to be very grounded for a spiritual path. Like if you practice for real, if you take this thing really seriously, if it's not just some sort of, I'm doing a bit of meditation and feel a bit better during my life. If you take spiritual practice for real, you're in for a ride. Quite a ride. And it's difficult. That's why it's so important to have good guidance, a good community that can catch you when you fall apart. With people who have experienced that multiple times ideally, and who come out the other side unscathed and with more power than before. So that's important. Well, I can't tell you how many times I felt real terror, like real fear. It's very often. And it's not fun at all. You feel very helpless and small, and you don't know what to do with yourself at all, and you question the most fundamental things, and it's not fun. And then, like, very often everything that you kind of know and rely on can quite quickly be out of the window. You start to question everything. So what the hell am I doing here? I'm crossing my legs and I'm just pretending to sit there and close my eyes and focus on the breath, and what am I doing? And that can lead into very deep kind of crisis, personal crisis. It's very important to have good guidance. It's, I think, that the number one thing. If you're serious about this path, you need good guidance. And because exactly for that reason, because once you grow, you will have to slip out of your old skin. It's kind of like the snakes do, right? Grow a little bit, so they need to leave their old skin behind. As long as you're comfortable in your skin, you don't want to leave it behind. And if you practice and practice, you kind of get out of it. And if then there is a conflict with, I don't want to leave my skin behind, I'm comfortable right now, but at the same time you have stimulated growth with your practice, there may be that conflict, and that's the fear you feel. Yeah, it's both a good sign and a sign to proceed carefully, with kindness, with compassion, in a good environment. And there is massive amounts of light in whatever darkness it is that you encounter, and in these kind of fears. There's unbelievable beauty in these kind of things. This is well worth to explore and go deeper into. It's really only when you are pressured that you grow. You can't grow if you're never experiencing pressure. It's another aspect of that. Like you may feel, oh, I'm a great meditator, because you've never been pushed. There's been never any pushing on you. And so you feel pretty good. Yeah, I'm pretty peaceful. A lot of people say, I don't need meditation because I'm quite peaceful. Just wait. Time will tell whether you're peaceful or not. As soon as your life falls apart around you, we will see if you're peaceful or not. Maybe you just had a nice life. Maybe you were just blessed by good stuff around you for a little while. But wait until the big illnesses come for you, the accidents, the losses of loved ones. Just wait. You know, God has a way of putting you to your knees very fast. And I wouldn't want to mess with it. I wouldn't want to assume a position of arrogance. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm doing really well because I know I can be brought to my knees so quick. You know? So it's really important to keep that kind of respect of something that is higher than yourself. And to enter it carefully, deliberately, with lots of love, lots of humility, the willingness to be guided, and you'll be just fine. Okay?
So I think that was all. Have a look. All right, yeah, I think that's enough for today. As always, there's just so much to be said about these kind of things. For now, I hope that was helpful. All right? And thank you very much for coming. Have a good time. A nice week.